cloud this time. Yeah, so tonight, how you doing, Grant?
Good. How are you all?
Good, thanks. And Alex with us, how you doing?
I'm doing.
You're busy, I know. We got Tave on here with us from Ohio again, but I just want to do a quick little kind of discussion here. Let Grant maybe clarify a few things. Alex, I think, may have some questions. Again, Tave might. And my son Josh is here with me, and we had a couple questions for Grant that'll be germane to what I'm going to say. But I do want to I kind of want to make this preliminary statement. Once again, I can't say this enough. And I can't say it in enough ways. I was driving down the trail to Naples last week, and I did a Facebook video just driving down the road, and I led my conversation to saying what I'm going to say right now, getting right to the point, because it just can't be said enough. And first, let me preliminarily state on behalf of everybody that's on this call that we're not giving legal advice. We're not acting as legal counsels or attorney. We're just discussing our own personal comprehension and understanding and of law and treaties and the Constitution. So one of the things that we're endeavoring to put forth right now, I am very much so, to help establish an organization of like-minded men and women who concur that the United States of America is a nation that was founded by a certain and specific group of men who founded this nation and fought for it. Many of them died for it. And when they did so, they clearly indicated that they wanted to preserve and establish this nation for themselves and their posterity. And that word posterity is often not understood by many people. Even the phrase "we the people," Americans in general, flag waving, patriotic. Oh, we the people, we're Americans, we're the posterity. In point of fact, the men that founded this nation did so for themselves and their posterity, meaning their children and their children's children and their children's children. It's a bloodline. And that is proven by way of definitions in law, dictionaries, just common sense. People know that posterity means your descendants, your children and their children and children's children. So the fact that they indicated that they were establishing this nation in pursuing peace and tranquility for themselves and their posterity has to have some meaning to it. And the biggest way I can make the point of that is by saying kind of two ways. I'm going to try to say it two ways. I always give the example of if somebody went out and bought 20,000 acres of property and they put a fence around it and they put it in trust and they said, yes, this is for me and my posterity. Common sense tells you that was for them and their children and their children's children and so on. So what would be the difference here? There'd be no difference. It's the same thing. There are millions of American people who do not know who they are. They don't know what they have. And it's our mission. My goal, my objective is to do everything I can to get that word out and establish an organization to help bring that awareness to people, to even help to defend to the best we can their stance and their position, things that they can do, share our views and ideas and opinions on things that could be done to establish their birthright, their heritage, their lineage, their blood relationship to the founders of this nation, the United States of America. So that's what the website taps-pma.com is endeavoring to do. And there's kind of, since we're in the early stages of getting this ultimate truth out to the American people, to let them know not only who they are and what they have, but to let them know that there are movements that have been taking place and psychological operations that have been put in place essentially to keep those people in the dark. You might say that the corrupt powers that be in this world, they do not want the posterity to know who they are, because they are lawfully entitled to all rights, privileges, and immunities equal to a king, because their patriarchal grandparents founded this nation, and they have privity of blood rights to the same rights, privileges, and immunities by blood right, by birthright, because it's theirs. They created it. It's their nation. So that's kind of the crux of it. And the one other way I could say it is, does it make sense at all if my patriarchal grandfather, and let's say the patriarchal grandparents of millions of Americans that live in this nation, shed their blood, gave their lives, gave their fortunes, fought, suffered, starved, went through hell and misery to establish a nation, and they won the American Revolutionary War, and they received all rights, privileges, and immunities equal to a king. Does it make, and they did so for themselves and their blood posterity, does it make sense that if they have that, that any Tom, Dick, or Harry that gets off a boat and comes over here from Mexico or Venezuela or Cuba or anywhere else, just because they come over here, they're an American, they have the same rights, privileges, and immunities? It makes no sense. It's foolish to think that because somebody comes over here and they are an American, now that they're an American, they're equal to the same blood that gave their lives to build the nation. And again, that goes back to my first point. That's like saying the person that bought 20,000 acres of property, put a fence around it, put it in trust, and said, this is for me and my family. Anybody can just come on over now and get on the property and say, hi, I want to live here. This is mine too. It makes no sense. So there's, I would say, a growing number of people on the internet now. Most people are familiar with the Anna von Reichs movement. Many people have become familiar with David Lester Straight. There's the Assemblies of America. There's other people out there. There's a brilliant man that we know by the name of Eric Dingus, who's doing his efforts at trying to reestablish common law. And all of those people, none of them seem to have the message of, wait a minute, there's a people that have privity of blood, blood right, birthright to the founding of this nation. And they are the ones that are entitled to all rights, privileges, and immunities. And all the others that just come over here, they're visitors, they're guests on our land. So first of all, we got to get the Americans that are posterity to wake up and know who they are and what they have and what they own. They're the owners of this land. They're the owners of the government that's currently in place, because their forefathers, who they have privity of blood to, established that government. And frankly, they did so as a measure of even protecting themselves and their posterity, because they knew what was coming, and they knew there needed to be government in place to handle and manage this influx of all these other people that would be coming in the future that were not posterity, whom they specifically delineated as being the ones who inherited the nation that they founded. So there's this kind of little dichotomy going on the one hand, it's common sense to say that there's a group of people that have privity of blood and they have all rights, privileges, and immunities because they are the founder. They're the founders. Their blood is their patriarchal grandparents. And there's a series of things that have transpired over the last, 100, 150 years since the founding of this nation, where it has clearly been infiltrated and hijacked by communists. The government that is operating has been infiltrated, hijacked by communists. It's become corrupt. So the posterity, the bloodline of the founding fathers, would be the ones who have the lawful authority to take back the government. As the Declaration of Independence says, the right to abolish a government if it becomes destructive of these ends. Who are the people that can do that? Can a bunch of Venezuelans and Cubans and Mexicans that come over and now they're on American soil, so they're Americans and they're US citizens, can they do it? Should they even have the right to do it? No. So who would? Clearly, the posterity would. So to the extent that there does exist the Republic of the United States of America, which its governmental seats are currently uninhabited because the de facto federal territorial plane government that's in place, that is a corporation that is acting as the government over all the American citizens, that's in charge and has cast a net called 14th Amendment over everybody, including posterity, is where there's a problem. This is where things need to be cleared up, even if it needs to go to the Supreme Court. And even if the Supreme Court were not to rule properly to clarify this issue, it would have to go to the world courts so that it could be reestablished with clarity. So that's kind of my preliminary opening statement on it. Anything, Grant, that you might say to elaborate on what I said?
Well, I think the Supreme Court has ruled that there is no common law in the federal territorial plane. That was Erie Railroad versus Tompkins. There's another Supreme Court, I don't know the name of it, but the court said in that case that the Constitution was written by the people it was written by in light of the common law. That was the only law that they knew and understood. So therefore, the preamble and the Constitution must be read in the light of the common law. Therefore, if you go back to the word posterity, I think the term posterity has a clear and designated meaning under the common law, which would mean the bloodline posterity.
Yeah, and not only under common law, but even today's Black's Law Dictionary and Bouvier's dictionary, which the Supreme Court uses, make it crystal clear of what posterity is. It's a direct bloodline descendant.
And Article 1 of the Treaty of Paris is what essentially acknowledged when the nation was created. That's the foundational principle and law in that treaty, which granted the sovereign capacity and proprietary ownership of land to that specific group of people who were the former subjects of King George III. They were no longer his subjects, but they became sovereigns and owners of the land. And with that newfound authority in international law, they created the United States of America. And that status that was recognized in Article 1 of the Treaty of Paris is reflected in the Constitution, where they have written citizen with a capital C.
If I can interject on that point, Grant, because today we were having a discussion, my son and I were, with Eric Dingus. As you know, he is having some real cerebral dissonance with this very issue we're discussing. He got rather upset today, actually, and hung up on me. And then he called my son and spoke to him at length. He's having a hard time because, again, he is. Well, let me back up. Let me make this statement. I'm not accusing or saying definitively. I'm going to say it like this. I personally strongly suspect that Eric Dingus, who happens to be, for those who haven't heard of him, many people have, he's brilliant in understanding common law and, Exodus 18 model and international law. And he is brilliant. Let me just put it like that. David Lester Straight, I've met him personally, spoke to him on the phone many times. He's called me. He's called my son. We know him intimately. We've been to his seminars. He's brilliant. Many people in the Anavan rights movement who I know, who are involved in assemblies, state assemblies, America's assemblies, all these groups of people never are addressing this issue that we're discussing, because they're all in the delusion, going back to my wanting to bring Eric Dingus up again, that, oh no, the founding fathers, they were thinking for themselves and the people at that time, as well as for us today. The posterity is all Americans. That makes no sense. It's not only inconsistent with definitions that currently exist in Black's Law and Bouvier's, it's not only inconsistent as Grant pointed out with common law on what posterity is, It's inconsistent with common sense on what we all know posterity is. It's bloodline, it's your descendants. Um, so when I remember David Straight having a conversation on the phone with me and Josh, and him taking issue with even state citizen, he's all about pushing this national thing. And as my son has pointed out, and he was talking with Eric about that today, Eric tends to say, oh, no, the way you break free from your 14th Amendment citizenship is you become a state national. And when you're a national, there, and my son pointed out to him, you're still under the jurisdiction of the federal territorial plane, because that's their term. That's their code, their status. They created that state national. That's not found in the Constitution. That's not something that the Republic established. That's a federal territorial plane established um, uh, status. So you're still subject to that federal territorial plane. You're not equal to a bloodline posterity. It's not the same thing. And again, when I say that, I have to reiterate, we're talking bloodline. We're talking inheritance is what we're talking. Inheritance. Me and my brothers died for this land, and I'm passing it to my son, who passes it to his son, who passes it to his son. That is bloodline inheritance. That's what America is, the land that we're on. This land is inheritance of the people who established it and their posterity, their bloodline. It's just that simple. And again, the fact that all these people come from all over the world and call themselves Americans, and they become 14th Amendment citizens, Grant can elaborate on this fact too. The Supreme Court has ruled that all 14th Amendment citizens are property and franchises of the U.S. government corporation. So there's clearly a distinction between an American 14th Amendment citizen and a posterity or a U.S. citizen, I'm sorry, a state citizen, which gets to the point I'm ultimately trying to make here. I suspect, again, I'm not really making an accusation or saying that this is the case, but Eric Dingus has said that David Straight's working for the Vatican, and David Straight has said that Anna von Reitz is working for the Vatican, and Eric has said that Anna von Reitz is working for the Vatican. I strongly suspect that Eric Dingus, David Lester Straight, Anna von Reitz, all of them are working for the Vatican, because none of them talk about posterity, and all of them shun state citizen term. All of them don't accept posterity definition in its true meaning. None of them do. So it's almost as if they were put out there to throw out this state national thing, and don't let the posterity know who they are. That's the bottom line. The Vatican, the powers that be in this world, they do not want the American people who are bloodline posterity to know who they are and what they are entitled to. And that makes me suspect when David Lester Straight, who I love the man, and maybe he's not an agent for the Vatican, but he's a brilliant man, but yet he's tried to steer my son, who's brilliant in his own right, away from going by the status of state citizen. But a state citizen is all that existed at the time. Prior to a 14th Amendment citizen, all there was we the people and their posterity, the ones that founded the nation, and they were state citizens. They were state citizens. The 14th Amendment, go ahead and elaborate that on, Grant. Again, there was maybe you can touch on the Supreme Court ruling about anybody prior to 1808 was by fact.
Well, I mean, the 14th Amendment was created to give a citizenship to a class of people that had been denied by Supreme Court ruling state citizenship. So they had to clothe them with a different form of citizenship and give them the right of residency.
That was so well the way you stated it that it's like I want you to state it again the same way, and then I want you to state it again 10 different ways, because that was so meaningful what you just said. People need to know this.
So our forefathers fought a war to free themselves from King George III. And in that political state of affairs that they were in, they were the property or subjects of King George III. Okay, by a miracle, they got freed, and they got a treaty recognizing them in international law. So based on that international law, they created their own government. Do you think it was the will and intent of our forefathers to construct a government that would be able to take the free people who nobody owned and give them a citizenship status, which could convert them into the property of the government that they created?
Say that again so that it's clear for people.
Okay, do you think our forefathers created a government with the intent and will to turn the free people of this nation that got freed from King George III? Do you think they created the government with the intent that that government would be able to turn those free men and women into the property of the government that they created?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I mean, I hope that that sunk in as well when you said it the second time for me, even though I already know what you're talking about. Just hearing you say it, it helps to make that point. It's so obvious. Let me say it. Would the people that founded this nation, who fought and died to become free men who were sovereign, create a government that could now turn their free people into property of the government and franchises of the government, which is what the Supreme Court has ruled 14th Amendment citizens are? Of course, they wouldn't have done that. I would even elaborate further and expand on this, if you will, Grant. They weren't dumb people. They were very smart people. My understanding, I haven't researched it too much, Thomas Jefferson could write in Greek with his left hand while simultaneously writing in Hebrew with his right hand. That's what I had heard. But I know the men they weren't dummies. They weren't hicks. They were smart, educated, intelligent people. Most people can't even grasp the way that the Constitution is written when they read it, because it was so advanced compared to the way people don't read and don't think today. And do you think that those people that founded this nation didn't have foresight to see that in the future there was going to be an influx of all kinds of people into this nation that were not their own, that were not their blood, that were not their posterity? And don't you think that they would have put something in place to protect themselves and their posterity? And I would
Well,
go ahead.
that's exactly what to me, that's exactly what it said, in order to ensure the blessings of liberty for themselves and their posterity. Now, you have to understand, the law of agency. And does it seem possible that the principle that the people, that a government that was created by the principle, that the agents of that government could then alter that government or alter parts of the government in order to turn the principle into their agent?
All right, and
They reversed it. They reversed the principal agency relationship.
Before you go on, let me help you make this clear for people too, because this is so important. Go ahead, Grant, and first let's back up and keep going where you're going, but let's back up and do that thing. You've done it before. It's beautiful how you do it. There's 3 words you can use that represent the sovereign and 3 that represent the slave, and they compare with one another. Give those examples again so people can really catch what you're saying here.
Well, you can go look up the law of agency. There's all, you can go into as in depth as you want to on it, but simply there's the principal agency relationship, and the principal is the creator, and in law, the creator controls. So, and then the agent is the one who's under the control of the principal. So our forefathers, well, I'll go back. So another word for principal would be sovereign. Another word for that would be master. Okay, you come down here under principal, the opposite of that would be agent. Another word for agent would be subject in relation to sovereign. And then over here would be servant or slave in relation to master. Right. They're all the same.
Right. So the point being is that you have certain terms that in law represent the one that has the power, that's in control, that has the title. That would be the sovereign. That would be the principal. That would be the what?
The owner.
The owner or the master, the sovereign, the
Yeah.
master,
Yeah.
the owner. And then on the other side, you have the agent who's acting on behalf of the sovereign, right?
Yeah, on behalf of the agents act. If you keep it in line, the agent's acting on behalf of the principal,
Right. And
the agent can only act within the scope of authority granted by his principal,
which would,
i.e., that's called law.
right, and that would be akin to what you said about master slave, right? The master's in
Right.
control, the slave's doing his bidding. You know, and
Right.
when we use the word slave, which is a tainted word, because for one, the whole concept of slavery, Hollywood has blown it way the hell out of proportion to begin with. I won't even go down that road right now. I've elaborated it on in other discussions I've had, but you know, even to make a more light-hearted use of the word slave, many people today, I don't care if you're Chinese, black, or white, people will say we're all slaves because they've enslaved us with their monetary system and overtaxation, and you know, everything costs too much. We're all slaves to the system, right? So to the extent that being a slave means you're subservient to, you're subject to. So
Right.
that's the point.
So right there, you said subject to. So go to the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized and subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
And thank you. See, again, you said it and I caught it. We need everybody that hears us to catch it. All persons that are, you included the word naturalized. So even people that come over and they become naturalized US citizens, they are still subject to the jurisdiction of the federal territorial plane as property and as franchises of that corporation.
So then the question becomes, is it legally or lawfully possible for the agent to turn its principal into its agent, and then they become the principal?
Now, that was another beautiful point. Let's make sure everybody that hears us gets it. Was it lawful for the federal government that the founding fathers established to do certain limited things, which again, I alluded to earlier, it has become an infiltrated and corrupt government? Can that government that those sovereigns created to do a few things now turn around and tell their master, their sovereigns, hey, we own you now?
And the answer to the question is, pursuant to the 13th Amendment, yes, they can, if you agree to it.
They got you to agree to it.
Yes, they can if you
And
agree to it. That's a good point.
They just have deceived we the people in multiple ways.
Yeah, you're right. They have. And before we get to how they've deceived through fraud and everything else, you mentioned the 13th Amendment. So why is it pursuant to the 13th Amendment that yes, they can?
Because it says, there shall be no slavery nor involuntary servitude. So the inverse of that means, but there can be voluntary servitude.
Yeah, clever wording.
So can't think of this Supreme Court case right now, but anyway, it said that waivers of constitutional rights must be voluntary.
Wow.
And you do it unbeknownst to you. I mean, these people that put all this together were very intelligent people, and they pulled the wool over your eyes, and they got you in multiple ways to make the appearance that you waived your rights, your privileges, and your immunities.
There it is.
Because U.S. citizens have no privileges or immunities. And they do not have all the rights that was reserved under the 9th Amendment. They have civil rights granted to them by their creator. But see, we the people had rights under the Treaty of Paris.
Right. Now, right.
And all the rights, because we enumerated certain rights in the Constitution, because they came back and after they made the Constitution, they came back and made the Bill of Rights.
Right.
Just to put it in writing. And then they put it in the Ninth Amendment. You know, just because we stated certain rights in this Constitution doesn't mean we do not retain all the other unenumerated rights.
Yeah, I want to again have you reiterate everything you said there, and then I'm going to segue this into a very profound issue that needs. This is a good segue for a profound issue that needs to be addressed. So, kind of reiterate what you said again, just so people get it.
About U.S. citizens.
Yeah, in terms of the rights, and
well, U.S. citizens were created by the 14th Amendment. The state citizens, referred to in the Constitution with a capital C, citizen, was created essentially by the Treaty of Paris.
Right. So again, stop. I'm gonna stop you moving along because these points are so profound. People need to get this. Again, 14th Amendment citizens were created by the federal government, which was created by the sovereigns who became sovereign via the Treaty of Paris after they won the American Revolutionary War and established their nation for themselves and their posterity.
And they essentially, because the unenumerated rights would be hard to write them all down.
Right.
So they reserved all the rights because they gave the government that they created only certain enumerated powers. And then the states, via their constitution, were only given certain enumerated powers via that constitution. And what the people that created the federal government said, just because we enumerated, the First Amendment, Second Amendment, all those amendments, all those rights that they enumerated,
right,
doesn't mean all these unenumerated rights that we were granted pursuant to the Treaty of Paris, that we didn't retain them.
Right. Now, go ahead.
The U.S. citizen and U.S. citizens, see, Article 4, Section 2 says, is the Privileges and Immunities Clause. And state citizens have privileges and immunities, which means that if you're a state citizen of one state and you move to another state, whatever rights that those state citizens of that state have, you have them reserved at Article 4, Section 2 as privileges and immunities. The Supreme Court ruled in the slaughterhouse cases that the U.S. citizens have no privileges or immunities, either pursuant to the Article 4, Section 2, or the Privilege and Immunities Clause in the 14th Amendment.
Now, would you concur, and maybe can you elaborate that when you reference privileges and immunities, you were referencing it in terms of its obvious application with one state citizen going to another state and having the same rights and privileges and immunities in that state. But when we're talking about immunities, would it be fair to say that immunities is also a term that would distinguish between a state citizen and a 14th Amendment citizen, in the sense that a 14th Amendment citizen might be subject to licensures and things by the federal government, but a state citizen is immune from that. They don't have to be subject to those types of things because they have immunity. They are sovereigns.
Well, we gave Congress plenary powers to govern the 10-mile square, the territories, and the insular possessions of the United States. And so in that plane, in that realm, they're the sovereign because we granted it to them. The people gave it to them. So they can make laws that pertain to their plane of jurisdiction, and it would apply to all persons that are within their plane of jurisdiction. However, when we were in the Republic, those laws that Congress made, which would be specific for the 10-mile square and the territories, could not be applicable to the state citizens of the Union.
So again, what you're saying is huge. Repeat it in another way, make it clear, because we're talking about state citizens, which would be the original term that would use to reference a founder of this nation and their posterity, having all rights, privileges, and immunities. So even though they gave that federal government over there certain powers to do certain things, make it clear the extent. And you alluded to it earlier when you said, unenumerated rights. I mean, our rights are endless, but we have, as sovereigns who established this nation, we're the sovereigns. And when I say we, yes, I'm talking about the blood posterity of the founding fathers, because that's the way they established it for their children and their children's 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 children. So we sit in that same throne that they sat in, so to speak. And our rights are unenumerated.
Well, I can put it in this way. We, the people, gave Congress the right to have a direct taxation upon we, the people, in the several states. But it has to be apportioned. Okay, so Congress previously passed a direct unapportioned income tax and tried to apply it to the people. Well, some of the people took it to the Supreme Court, and that's the Pollock decision. The Supreme Court ruled in that case that no, Congress, you cannot put an unapportioned direct income tax upon the people. Okay, so, but once they flipped and they got these new class of citizens, no matter where they are in the several states of the Union, they're always subject to the jurisdiction of the 10-mile square. So, yes, an unapportioned income tax can be applied to them.
To the 14th Amendment citizen.
That's right.
But not to the state citizen.
No, it has to be apportioned. And I think that's the Pollock. That's the Supreme Court Pollock decision.
And then, you often use the example, and because this is one that all these movements out there, all the patriot movements, or, the David Straight, the national, America's assemblies, I'm a state national. I'm not I'm revoking my 14th Amendment citizen. I'm a state national. I don't have to have a driver's license. I have the right. I have rights. I have rights. Give clarity on the fact that is not necessarily true, because again, a national is under the jurisdiction of the federal territorial plain still.
That's the way I've read the wording in the federal territorial law, and I think that word, that national that you're using, comes from the distinction they had to make with the people in Guam. And I don't know the exact reason, but for some reason they had to designate them differently from U.S. citizens. Now, I don't know that. Everybody will have to go look that up. But to me, that's where that's coming in.
Right, Josh, what do you know about that? Anything?
It's about citizens of the several states of the Union.
Right. I just a couple of little bow ties to put on this much of the conversation so far. Josh, do you know anything relative to the term national?
Well, I had this discussion with Eric today. He was telling me that, people should give up their U.S. citizenship and become a national. I said, well, show me anywhere in the Constitution where the word national is applied. I said, I can tell you that it's codified in 8 U.S. code and tells you what it is specifically. And if you're claiming to be a national, well, you're still under the jurisdiction of the federal territorial plain. So because you can't show me anywhere in the Constitution where that term was applied, and to my knowledge, that term was not even used back then, you are either an inhabitant or a state citizen. I said, so the only conclusion I can reach is that people that are claiming to be nationals are under the jurisdiction of the federal territorial state, because it's codified in U.S. code. And it tells you it's those who have allegiance to their respective state. Well, the respective state that it's mentioning is the territorial state.
Right. Yeah, that's a profound point. Which, just to elaborate that on
And
the
Eric,
listeners,
wanted to say, well, you're only a state citizen if you're involved in the body politics. So that would be your Governor DeSantis or Congress. I said, well, show it to me. I said, because an inhabitant and a state citizen is one and the same. Now you're telling me if I'm not involved in politics, I'm not a state citizen, but show it to me.
right? And Grant's addressed this before, and we've discussed it before, but this is a significant point that Josh just made. That when people don't, most people don't understand the difference between the state and the state, meaning the territorial states.
That's another issue I didn't bring up with Eric.
Right, versus the original constitutional republic, United Union states, right? Those states are not the same as the fabricated overlay, which I believe Grant even pointed out in our last discussion, right? Is in, what is it, in 1880 through 121, or?
Yeah, the original states in the Republic, those states were created by acts of the people, the sovereign people, and they created their constitutions, and they joined the Union pursuant to Article 4, Section 4. And so they were the Union states.
Right now, when
Now,
people
Eric was under the impression also today, he says, well, even if you're a posterity, and you try to go to the Supreme Court, they can't hear you. I said, well, nobody ever has, Eric. I says, when one of the posterity like myself, and I says, I'm directly related to William Livingston, by the way, who's a signatory to that Constitution. I'm his descendant, and I can prove it because my family, the Van Scoik family, okay, William Livingston married somebody in my family. So our families are tied. That makes me one of his posterity. So when one of the posterity goes into that Supreme Court and brings these issues up, then we'll see if it's going to be heard or not, because nobody has done that yet. So you can say that they can't hear me, but I don't know that's true or not. So it needs to be brought
you
up.
won't know until you go there, but I think I've heard that they have 2 oaths of offices, and I'm going to assume that one oath is they took an oath to the judiciary in the Republic, and then they took an oath in the federal territorial plane.
That would make sense. And even if it gets to the point where we are taking this issue to the Supreme Court, which is what we will do. I mean, that's why we're putting this organization together, because we're looking to stand up to protect what belongs to the posterity lawfully.
I have a question on just what Grant said. If at any time is convenient regarding the states and the Title 28 that he just touched on.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so I asked that last week, but I found another question that popped up in my head, because last week I asked you states the reference in Title 28
80.
are not the unions, the actual original states, but they are the states created in the world, because they are really words in Title 28. So my follow-up question after this week, I thought of, well, if that's Alabama state in Title 28 is a creation of in the federal plane, then the United States of America in 28 section 1746(1) must also be a creation in the federal plane.
Alabama joined the union.
I would say that what you're talking about, 28 USC 1746(1) is just them recognizing the original de jure jurisdiction, and they had to give you remedy to where you could act in the Republic if you so choose.
So then what makes that different?
Because they just recognized the government and the states and the federal government that was created by we the people. And they could not separate you from the common law. It would be unconstitutional.
Right.
However, the states that joined the Union was created by acts of the people. The states at 28 USC 81 through 131 was created by acts of Congress.
So then there must be another.
So one is the principal and one is the agent. Now,
Yeah, I understand all that.
in the de jure republic, those states were created by the principal or the sovereigns. Now, so those states that came over that was created by acts of Congress were created by essentially by the agents of the people. But they were acting in their sovereign authority to do so because they were acting create a government within the federal territorial plane.
So, Mike, I agree to all that, and that's not illogical for me. For me, if the only pillar that the argument stands on, that the states that are referenced in Title 28, is that they are not the actual states, or they are not referrals to the actual states that were created by the people, but they are merely in the federal territorial plane. And the only pillar this argument stands on is that because they arise out of Title 28, that logic, anything that
were created. But see, but the Republic did not arise out of Title 28. It's merely referenced. No.
And neither did Alabama.
Yes, it did, because that was created by an act of Congress. That state was created by Congress, and it never joined the Union pursuant to Article 4, Section 4. Now, in 28 USC 1746-1, they did not create the Republic. They were just referencing to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why did they then not reference Alabama?
Alabama, that there was already the Alabama that was created by the people that joined the Union, and that Alabama has common law. But these new states that they created have no common law.
I believe there's only one state that's questionable on whether they join the Union or not, and I believe that's Texas. Texas and Alaska.
Well, I would say it would be. I'd say it wouldn't be Texas, because when Texas was a sovereign, independent nation, but it joined the Union. Yeah. And when it joined the Union, it gave up its sovereignty as a nation state of Texas and became a state of the United States of America. And I believe that's what the court held in Texas versus White, Supreme Court. Yeah. Once in the Union, always in the Union.
I'm still not understanding. So is it correct that Alabama was already there before Title 28 referenced it in it? Okay, and the United States of America was already there before it's been referenced in Section 1746?
Yeah, the Republic was there. It had to be. It's
so
Republic is the foundational law. Because without the Republic, they had no power to create Title 28 except for the power that was given to them by the people at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17.
Okay, so then it is correct that both Alabama and the United States of America, as referenced in Title 28, were there before Title 28 was created. And so, no. That's what you just said.
Well, I guess you could say that Alabama, the de jure state of the Republic, was referenced in Title 28, 1746-1, because it talked about the United States of America, the Republic. So Alabama is one of the several states of the Union of that Republic.
Yeah, I'm just still not getting
but Title 28, 81 through 131, that Alabama had to be created by Congress. They had to have a territorial overlay of their original de jure state in order for them to have a jurisdictional plane in order to operate totally within a federal territorial government.
Just for Alex,
yeah,
just for clarity of this conversation for people that listen to it, because you always reference Alabama. Is there a reason why you just keep referencing Alabama as opposed to any other state? Because all of them were created in Title 28.
No, the reason was just because it was the first one. It's just in 81, Section 81.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. What I'm looking for is something that I can comprehend logically, because I'm still getting stuck in some counter.
Well, I don't know how else to explain it, except in order to understand what we're talking about, you have to be able to think abstractly.
And I just don't understand how, unless
Two different states. There's a go look up de jure. Go look up de jure and de facto.
I get all this.
So all right, hold on. I'm gonna try to help make clarity of this, because I can hear, Alex, that you're having an issue with this. What is the crux of your question or concern or issue? Let's try it. Say it again.
It's this assertion that the Alabama that is referenced in Title 28 is not the actual state that joined the Union. You created it within the federal. And I asked, why is that so? The answer was because it's in Title 28.
All right, let me answer it then. All right, so yeah, right. So
Let me continue, because that's only half. Because then the other that came up in my mind was, if that is the only argument that would substantiate this assertion, that anything that is referenced in Title 28 must also be a creation in the federal plain, such as Section 1746. And this is where I'm getting confused. There's a contradiction.
well, let me ask first. Is you can answer. Let me ask the question. You answer it, Grant, for Alex. Is Title 28, 80 through whatever it is, 121,
81 through 120.
81 through 121, are they actually stipulating in there that they are establishing or creating all of the states again?
No.
Somehow.
No.
Hold on. Let.
Well,
I'm sorry.
it's obvious. Those states were created by statute.
How were they? How were they created by statute? And how do we know they were created by
They were created statutorily.
Where and when? When and where and how?
Title 1 through all the titles that exist today are United States Code. That is the law within the federal territorial plain.
Right. So where does it show that they created Alabama and the other states in the codes?
Title 28, I think it's 81 through 131.
So are you saying that simply the mere fact that they're referencing the states is
well, because they had to create those states in the federal territorial plain.
So you're saying that the mere fact that they referenced them was their way of creating them.
Yeah.
And this is my confusion. That's what you just said. The mere fact that they're just referenced, not that they're created, just referenced. That's it. If you read those 81 through 131, they're only referenced.
So in UCC, Universal Commercial Code, does not apply and has no power or authority within the several states of the Union. Now, UCC does have power and law in the federal territorial states. Because in UCC 1-105 is one of your remedies. And I believe roughly it says, barring agreements of the parties, this transaction will be deemed to have occurred within this state. Now, when they said state, they're referring to the federal territorial states, because UCC only applies in those states.
Right. Now, how do we know that UCC only applies in those states?
Well, I just gave you a UCC, the barring agreement of the parties. This transaction, every transaction that you do, a contract, whatever, barring agreement of the parties, it will be deemed that transaction will have taken place in this state. And when they say, in my interpretation, now you can interpret any way you want to, but in my interpretation, they're talking about the states at 81 through 131.
So can we answer the question whether because it's not expressed textually?
Well, if you really want to, I don't know what else to say. But if you really want it, you can go buy that book, US of A versus US. And I think it's laid out quite well in that book.
but then your answer would only be because it's referenced in there. It wouldn't. Or
And
so you're saying, well, okay, you go walk in, just to prove my point, you walk into any court in any of one of the states today and try to execute under the common law.
yeah, I think hold on, let me say something here, because this might help, because this is what he means by thinking abstractly, and the fact that there are different planes. Because you got to remember that Grant is intimately familiar with Supreme Court cases that deal with the different planes of jurisdiction, and that's relative. The mere fact that there are distinctions, the mere fact that the courts have ruled different planes of jurisdiction, is consistent with the fact that there are union states that are in the republic wherein there is common law, and states that were created by the federal territorial plane wherein there is no common law. And the fact that the courts have ruled that there is no common law in that federal territorial plane.
no, I understand that there's two planes. I can totally comprehend that.
Right.
I'm not disputing that they're not ruling according to the common law. I'm just trying to figure out how would I substantiate my own claim if I claim that it's referenced that Title 28 is not the actual state of the union, and I would not know the argument that.
I don't think that would be a very good argument to make. I don't think you'd ever win with an argument like that. They're not going to. They won't acknowledge it.
I mean, there's. I could take. I don't have time to do it. And I don't have the cases in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I could. I know some court cases. I could prove my point.
Because why this is not just interesting to me, but also very interesting, because I could use it if I had substantial evidence. Because I'm trying to counter argue a claimed sovereign immunity.
I done explain to you, you're wasting your time because you don't have the status to do that.
Okay, I'm not even disputing that point.
Right.
But I'm still interested to counter argue that, because I could say, well, what does state mean? Which state do you mean, Judge? Do you
That's exactly right.
28, or do you mean the state that joined the Union in 1849 or whatever it was? State, do you mean the people? Because the people are actually the state. And if I had any argument that would substantiate that the state that's created or that's referenced in Title 28 is actually not the actual state that joined the Union, that would be interesting to me. And that's why I'm wondering where that could be, because to me, it just looks like a reference.
Well, it's foundational in the ideal of federalism. The principle of our republic is federalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
sure.
So in that system of government, the several states, they form a unity, but they are independent in their internal affairs.
I understand all that. Yeah.
Well, no, you don't, because that's not true in these new states.
Okay.
In a different way, it might be, but it's not true in the original form, because there's certain things like time. I forget where time is created in Title 16, maybe. I can't think. I don't remember which one it was. But anyway, they created standard time. And it says in there that they have a duty to use it. So I'll give the state of Tennessee, for example. The state legislator here wanted to do away with daylight savings time. But they couldn't do it until they got Congress's permission. So that shows you right there that they are not independent internally.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they did give up some sovereignty when they joined the Union, though, right?
Yeah, they gave up when they joined the Union, they agreed to the contract of the Constitution for the United States of America, which meant that, privileges and immunities, all those rights that the people retained under the 9th and the 10th Amendment. That's why they put that in there, was to reserve the rights that the people had in their states under the ideal of federalism.
Sovereign states, the actual states that joined the Union, are they, for example, now states do get federal funding? Is that still within the federalism?
No, that's in the federal territorial plane.
Everything is operating in the federal territorial plane, Alex. Everything.
In today's world, that's
like, if a state gets federal funding, is it now converted into an unsovereign federal territorial?
That means it's adopted the legal creation as created by an act of Congress in Title 28. Therefore, they're acting no longer in the Republic, but within basically UCC, which was created by Congress, so to govern commerce. See, in these new states, you're under UCC. In the old states, you were under the old commerce law.
So would the argument then be, if that state's funding operates under the UCC, therefore it's not within the, I don't even know the right word.
It's not operating within the jurisdiction of the Republic.
And what is where's the provision that says that no Republic state would be able to get federal funding?
Because they don't exist there.
But they exist. But then the federal district still exists, because they did give them that 10 square mile.
Yeah, because that's the ideal of federalism. Congress, and it has certain powers and sovereignty within that federal territorial jurisdiction.
And it cannot.
And the several states had their sovereign powers within their jurisdiction.
But what prevents Congress to send money from their 10-mile square district over to Alabama, for example?
You're talking about Alabama, the Republic?
Yes, Republic.
Because one thing, there's nobody in office in that government. There would be nobody there to accept it. And in the Republic, under the laws of the Republic, you extinguish your debts with lawful money, which would be gold and silver. And in the federal territorial plane, under UCC, you can discharge your debts within specific notes, which have no assured value, which is Federal Reserve notes.
Oh, this is a beautiful, substantiated argument that has so much, this actually has weight to me. Like, when I hear this is totally evidence. Because if that is so, and I know there's just silver and gold or something, some provision in there, and you're right, that could be an argument. Like, if this state receives money that it doesn't pay in gold and silver, then obviously it's not the Republic.
So if you had legal relations and you used your remedy, you can bar an agreement. You can bar the agreement to the Republic and be under the laws of the Republic if both parties agree. That's your UCC remedy.
So even in my status, I can do that or not?
Possibly, but you didn't control the condition precedent to. See, that's the reason I'm saying you're just barking up the wrong tree, because you didn't control the condition precedents to any legal relations you had previously, of which now you're saying you have a controversy to go into some court and demand common law. It's not possible.
I see. But it's still a good explanation. I mean, if that Alabama state, that real state, the sovereign state that joined the Union at some time, could only pay back their debt with gold or coins, And it does
It
not.
says- It says in Article 1 that states shall make no money except, gold and silver.
Right.
But that it only says that they should mint nothing like that. Not
It says gold and silver. They're only allowed to make payment in gold and silver. That was the
payments.
yeah. So if they wanted to create money, they could only do it that way.
Wow.
See, in the Constitution, we the people said that Congress has the right to coin money and
Right.
regulate the value thereof.
Right.
But we said nowhere in there in legal relations to we the people in our several states and the Republic that they could go make an agreement with a foreign entity, the Federal Reserve, and create paper money.
Right.
But now over in the federal territorial plane, they have the absolute authority to do that.
Yeah. Huh?
And it's in commerce, the whole system that we live under depends upon that.
Where does it say that we live under the UCC? Where's the evidence for that?
There's some little pamphlets I showed. I could go into it if I can show you in books I've got. But that's essentially what you're operating under.
How can you show them to me?
Do you want to write up?
I've got it in books.
Do you want to ride up to Grant's house with me and my son?
Yeah. Yes. Now he's totally on the spot.
Yeah. No,
That's fine with me.
yeah, we're gonna probably go next week, Josh, right? Or with the week of your birthday, right?
Yeah, like the first week of March, 2nd at the latest.
Yeah, we'll probably leave March 2nd. We pick you up probably heading up that way.
I can use my own car.
Well, whatever. If you want.
Just wait for Grant's approval. Don't put him on the spot.
He just said that's fine. You don't mind.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you go with us, we could just split the cost of everything, split the cost of, gas and, if we need a place, place to stay, we can split the cost or whatever. Like if we get a, Airbnb or something.
Yeah. Okay. And is there another indication apart from the payment of like the difference in the payment that the state and the Republic would never pay other than with gold? Is there something else that is indicative of that the state is operating as a federal territorial plain state?
Because it's using it's all statutory law, which has really nothing to do with the common law.
Yeah, that's
actually common law is in the Republic, but there is no common law in the federal territorial plane. That was the last switching time case. Erie Railroad versus Tompkins.
Yeah, I think that's frankly a parallel answer, or you should be as giddy about that as you were over the gold and silver versus the paper money, because common law versus their statutory law. That's kind of like gold and silver versus their paper, reserve notes. It's just another example. Both of those are like equal examples. Like he said, go into a court and try to argue common law.
Well, that's the thing. They say common law is case law. That's what they say.
That's like what?
They say that common law is case law. This is their
first. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's case law.
Yeah, but it's like the tiniest bit of common law is case law. If you look up
that's exactly why if you don't know the law and use your remedy, you can't go into court and start arguing case law pre-1933, essentially.
This is a good segue. I had a segue earlier, but then we yielded over to Alex, but this has brought me right back to the segue. Because this has to do, the segue I was going to make earlier was this going back to Eric Dingus. And, we were talking about the difference in sovereignty, right? Versus a 14th, sovereign posterity, sovereigns versus 14th Amendment citizens, and the difference between, rights and privileges and immunities for the sovereigns and the posterity versus no privileges and immunities for 14th Amendment citizens per the Supreme Court's own rulings. One of the things that Eric says, and this needs to be addressed. Oh no, man, we're all one in Christ. See, one of the things I've been harping around on for years is, I did it with the bigvirushoax.com with Righteous Army, is what I've been pointing out is that there is clearly and obviously a new world order, one world government corporation that they're endeavoring to establish, period, plain and simple. And that's why they're trying to implement their digital currency so that it can have financial control over everybody, social media censorship, social scoring systems. So that's what ultimately all of this is about, and why this thing about true American posterity sovereigns is so important. As I mentioned earlier, they don't want the posterity to know who they are and what they have, for obvious reasons, that they have power and will be able to make some changes, and they're trying to keep that in the dark.
The posterity, just
Hold on, my son's saying something.
just my opinion that it even goes into a deeper conversation.
Yeah, it does. It goes into a deeper
about who
spiritual
the posterity
conversation.
is, you know.
But the point I want to make here is when Eric Dingus takes his position of, no, man, we're all Christ. We're all equal in Christ. Well, the best way I try to make this case to people when they try to use we're all one in Christ to try to justify that we all have the same rights, or even the word sovereignty. Hey, who are you? Like somebody commented on one of the videos, who are you to tell me that I need to be a posterity to have my sovereign rights? I'm a sovereign, and who are you to tell me otherwise? And my answer to him was, hey, great. Anybody and everybody can call themselves sovereign, kind of like the point you made before, Grant. Yeah, try living out with the daisies, without law, without government, and see where it gets you. As long as you are surviving in this world, you are subject to law. And we hear it all the time in the media and in politics that we're a nation of laws. We're a nation of laws. Well, we're putting it to the test, because if we are a nation of laws, then there are a people here called true American posterities who are sovereigns, and they have all rights, privileges, and immunities per law, because they are the privity of bloodline foundation of the people that found this nation. And they're not 14th Amendment, property and franchises of the government, as the Supreme Court has ruled. So there's clearly a difference. So yes, it would be nice to say we all have sovereignty and we're all one. But when you're talking about law, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about systems of government. And yes, we can get into how
We're talking about what is.
we're talking about what is. And we can go on about how governments are conceived in the minds of man, et cetera, et cetera. But so long as we are living in that reality, kind of shed some light on that, to make some clarity for people who might feel like, wait a minute, what are you talking about, man? I have sovereignty. Oh, what are you talking about? We're all one in Christ, man. Versus this reality that no, there's treaties and there's laws and there's a people that have blood privity. Kind of shed some light on that issue.
Well, essentially, governments are created by peoples that can help them establish themselves in legal relations to other people, essentially, where there's laws that govern the relationships between them. Because if there were no laws out here, can you imagine the chaos? And all these people that said they're sovereigns, well, that it could be true that maybe everybody could be sovereign, but is everybody going to act? If everybody acted perfectly under the law as given under the commandments of God, then there probably would be no need for a government. But they don't. So it's become necessary for humanity to create governments, to create laws which establish legal relations to keep people civilized. Because if you didn't have laws, people would be killing each other. It would be anarchy. And I really don't think nobody wants to live in that world. And in regards to, you want to be a sovereign, okay? Let's say Yeah, I say I'm a sovereign, and I take a flight over to China, and I walk up there and I say, "Hey, I'm a sovereign. I don't recognize your government. Your laws don't pertain to me. I can do whatever I want." You take a flight over to England. You'll see King Charles is the sovereign over there. You walk over there and tell him that you're the sovereign over there. And you can do anything you want to do. You'll find out what happens. Or you can do that in any other nation in this world and find out what happens. Tell me how long you're going to act as a sovereign.
Right. And therefore, I would just interject at that point. That puts the cap on everything we've been talking about in this whole discussion when I make the point that there is a nation that was established by a people who they themselves created for themselves and their posterity. And there are laws that have substantiated that fact. And therefore, people have to live in accordance with that reality, whether they like it or not. That's law. That's the way it is. That's just how it is. If you miss the boat, you missed the boat. You know, so what you should be doing, and I don't know if you heard the video, but the video that's the top video on the website, where it was the very first public discussion we had on this, and you weren't on that discussion, Grant. I did my best to hold my own on it. There was a couple people on there, and a couple of them were two black men. One of them, very smart, intelligent guy. He was a 40-year veteran highway patrol officer in Ohio. He often would come on Joseph Gibson's Blog Talk radio show talking about these issues of rights and nationals and, you know, patriotic things. And he thought he was going to be at odds with my position. But when he listened, he came in and started talking. He says, "I don't disagree with the thing this man is saying." The other black man that was on there identified himself as being a Moor. You know, and the Moors had a treaty with, right, the Treaty of Friendship, right, with the founding fathers of this nation, and he agreed with everything I was saying. He's saying that sounds good to me. If what it takes is going to be the posterity sovereigns of this nation to put things back in place, then let it be so. So there's clearly an issue relative to law and the fact that that's just the way it is. And there are people, they need to wake up. They need to know who they are. They need to find their roots. They need to trace themselves back to know that they are bloodline, privity of blood, posterity. So we can start organizing. We put the organization together. We're here. True American Posterity Sovereigns, TAPS PMA for Private Membership Association or Private Ministerial Association. .com or .org.
Well, I would say that we are the foundational citizens of this republic.
Exactly. Well stated.
And if you talk about common law and the word posterity, and you don't go in the Bible and read Luke chapter 3, they go to great lengths to show posterity.
Yep, I sure do. Yep, posterity, bloodline, lineage. You know, hey, this is where, you know, I mean, I guess I got to go back to that can of worms again, and to some degree, because people, you know, I'll talk about God's people because God clearly has a people, but then people will say, "Oh, we're all God's people through Christ."
It doesn't mean that everybody that's posterity is necessarily good. I mean, Bill Clinton is
Right.
posterity,
right?
And he was a scumbag, and he's
Right.
posterity.
Right.
So,
And Grant made the ultimate
I think Hillary
point.
Clinton is too.
what's
Right.
that?
I think Donald Trump is too.
And Hillary Clinton.
I found out Donald Trump is not. His family came here in the 1860s, I believe it was.
Okay.
I could be
I've
wrong.
heard that he was, maybe.
But at any rate, what we do know is that there are millions of Americans that do not even know who they are, what they have, what they own, what they're entitled to.
Hey,
They
Mike,
need to
this is
wake up.
Clinton.
That might be why Bill Clinton, because I know his family traces back to early New York. That might be why he was able to get away from the impeachment and take an oath in the Republic, because he qualified to be able to do that.
Right.
Yep. Because like a friend of mine said that somewhere in their law it says that, you know, essentially these people, they can hold any office they choose.
Check that out, make sure.
Hey, this
Right.
is Clinton. I got a question and a statement. Like in the books at Sons of the Revolution, both Bushes are in there and Clinton. So they do all three of those people do have people to go all the way back,
Yes.
or they wouldn't be or they wouldn't be able to get into that because they run your DNA. But my question is, how many people do you think it's going to take for us to be like-minded to take this to? I guess what I'm getting is we're going to have to take it to the Supreme Court eventually, right?
If we have to take it to the world court, we will. If the Supreme Court did not rule in accordance with what is clearly based upon law,
Then we would
Then-
hold the world court to that pact that they signed, acknowledging that the republic exists. That would be the next move.
Because, I got
And by the
some
way, Clinton-
ideas to wake some people up, and I can run it by y'all at a different time, but, that might, explain it or catch people's attention on social media instead of, us talking about it, maybe doing like a digital cartoon about it or something catchy like that that's not really expensive, but definitely would catch people's attention.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Clinton. And by the way, I saw you come on. Obviously, as you could tell, when I'm talking, I don't stop, and when Grant's talking, you don't stop, and when Alex is talking, she don't stop because we're just going here. I wanted to say, welcome in earlier. So thanks for joining in from North Carolina again, Clinton.
Yes, sir.
We had Tave on here earlier from Ohio. We have Alex on the phone here with Grant. Yeah, Tave left the scene. We've been here for a while. But yeah, that's great, Clinton. Any ideas you have, certainly, help us out, whatever you can come up with. We need to get this thing rolling. This is like the pinnacle of truth. I mean, we're living in the apocalypse, which is the unveiling, the revealing. We're living in the time of the unveiling and people coming to terms with ultimate truth here. And this is ultimate truth. Because again, we could back up, before this was what's being promoted to when it was, just assemblies and David Straits and nationals. That was good for waking people up and letting them realize a certain level of things. But this is the ultimate reality, is that there is a certain particular specific people that fought and died to establish this nation under God at the time when they did it. And they did so for themselves and their posterity, meaning their bloodline, in their own words. And they created the government that they intended to be able to control what they knew what was going to become an influx of all kinds of other peoples into a nation they created for themselves and their posterity. So there's millions of people that have been deceived and frauded, the ones that have been frauded are the posterity. That's the bottom line. The ones that have been frauded, because the American citizens had just come over here, or they were born here 1 or 2 generations ago or 3 generations ago because their parents moved over here from some other nation. They had nothing to do with the founding of this nation. Those weren't posterity. That's not posterity. They just became 14th Amendment citizens. And the Supreme Court has ruled that all 14th Amendment citizens are property of the federal government and are franchises of the federal government. That's not a sovereign. So the posterity are sovereigns by blood, by privity of blood, by birthright, by treaty. So
they are the owners.
They're the owners. Thank you, Grant. We are the owners of this nation, and they need to wake up. So this video that we did tonight, this discussion, to me, I think I intended this to be a kind of an in-depth discussion to really drive that point home, and I believe we've done so. I'm going to make this the actual #1 top video on the website now.
Reinforces your courage, and your self-esteem, and allows you to do things like I'm getting ready to do now by falling against the state.
Say that again, Josh. I love the way you said that.
When you know who you are, it gives you a sense of reinforcement and encouragement. Knowing and finding out what I've found out has given me the courage to be able to go and file cases in court.
Yeah, it's turned our lives around.
File another one against the state.
Yeah, my son has turned our lives around over the last few years with his research into our family history, who we are. It's like when you know who you are, where you came from, and particularly if you can discover that you are bloodline posterity to the men and women who founded this nation and made it what it is. All the people that are enjoying the fruits and the privileges and the benefits, I don't want to say privileges, all the fruits and rights that they do have, in this nation, even though this nation has been infiltrated and hijacked and corrupted. That's all the more reason why we need the posterity to rise up. It's the resurrection, man.
My motivation for doing it is I'm tired of seeing my land being destroyed by foreign corporations and stuff like that. I'm tired of seeing farms going out of business. So I have a deep desire to try to fight against it. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And
So anybody that hears this, if you're posterity, get in touch with us, join our meetings. All the information's on the website. TAPS, TAPS, True American Posterity Sovereigns, hyphen PMA for Private Membership Association. Nobody has to pay. I put a donation link on the website. I put a membership fee of $100 because, anybody that does that, anybody that actually goes online and pays $100 membership fee, and we can see it came in as $100 membership, we know that's somebody who knows that they're posterity. They're trying to help out. They're making a financial contribution to help support our efforts. Then that's like an in-house organization that is growing. But the meetings will always be open to the public, because the public needs to know about this as well. Any final thoughts from anybody? Grant?
Yeah, I'm going to give you some information that you might want to go check out. And then I'm going to go. If you go to YouTube, it's called Know Your Constitution. Carl Miller, parts 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Now, there's another Carl Miller on there that's not this one. I've not listened to him, but I have this guy. This guy here, you'll see his picture, and he's got a cap on, baseball cap.
Oh, okay, great.
And I think if you listen to him, he'll just add to what we said.
All right, super. And each week, Grant can throw other tidbits. He mentioned the book U.S. of A versus U.S., right?
Right.
There's many other resources. And again, we'll be happy. You could follow us up, Alex, or we'll pick you up. You could drive with us. We could share costs on stuff. But on the first week of March, we'll go up and spend 2 or 3 days maybe up there. We can meet with a couple times with Grant and go over some things. We'll bring all the paperwork that Grant gave us back up there with us. And that CD, I did get it recorded. I put it on the website. And I have the files on my computer in case we need to just put it on a disk and give it to somebody.
Okay.
So yeah, thanks again, Grant. God bless you, brother. And
okay.
Thanks.
Good night.
You too. Thanks for joining in, Clinton. And God bless you. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for calling in again, Alex. Actually, I called you Alex. But any last thoughts, Alex? I can't hear you, Alex. I don't know. Maybe she hung up. All right.
everybody's all.
Good night.
Hear ye, hear ye.
Now, how do
hear
I
ye.
end this?
Yeah.
Here, I got to end this little
What's this rash on your
conversation.
face?
It's a little,
Boom.
Oh, you picked
little
the
pimple
scale.
I picked.
Yeah, you don't talk about that right now because I'm still recording. We don't need to be hearing about that.
I had to get a